Our first presenter today will be Professor Peta Wyeth. Peta is an Autism CRC project leader and head of school for computer science at Queensland University of Technology. Peta is at the forefront of research into emerging technologies for games and other interactive experiences. She has wide-ranging experience in the application of human-computer interaction and interaction design techniques for the development of technology for education and entertainment. Her research outputs are tangible products that have been used in a range of educational settings. Today, Peta is here to talk to us about StepWrite, a co-designed app to help children with their persuasive writing. Without further delay, I'd like to welcome Peta.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'll just share my screen with you. Okay, I trust you can all hear that. I will see that. Yes, as Cheryl mentioned, today I'm presenting StepWrite, which was a project designed to harness the writing potential of children on the autism spectrum. This is a really collaborative project, and I'm presenting this work on behalf of my colleagues Anne Ozdowska, Jill Ashburner and Suzanne Carrington. And what I love about this project was our ability through the CRC to bring together this truly multidisciplinary team. We have Jill, who's a specialist in speech therapy and has worked at Autism Queensland for many years now as their research director. Suzanne Carrington, who's an expert in education and worked as the Associate Dean for Research in our Faculty of Education. And Anne Ozdowska, who was our, the pivotal person for this project, who brought it all together. She was our PhD student, so passionate about the project. So I'm really honoured to present this work on behalf of the team. So before I get started, I too would like to acknowledge the Turrbal and the Yagara as the First Nation owners of the lands where QUT now stands. I pay my respects to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits, and recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, research and learning. I acknowledge the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continue to play within the QUT community. So before I get into the details of StepWrite, I just want to go through the history. This has been a project that started in 2014. We've got to the point in 2021 where we're about to release an app on the App Store, and that's very exciting for us. So there's been a number of iterations of this particular project, right from its beginning back in 2014, where we proposed a project called Project Power Tree, which was really focused on overcoming difficulties with written expression for children on the autism spectrum. This was an initial project, one of the starting projects for the CRC Autism, and this is when the group was brought together. We were fortunate enough, it was successful, and we really wanted to grow what we could do with the technology that we built. So we were interested in creating, supporting technology to help children with written expression. And so in 2017, we were provided with additional funding from the CRC Autism through a utilisation project proposal. And at that point, we changed the name of the tool to Power Writer. We used our lessons learnt from the initial project to refine the development, and I'm going to talk about that today, until we've got to 2021, where we changed the name yet again to StepWrite, which we think is a great name. We didn't have any issues with trademark with that name, and what we've included is some final updates, refinement and a pending release, which is very exciting. So what were we interested in? We know, and studies have shown, that academic tasks, and particularly writing-based tasks, are among the most challenging for children on the autism spectrum. And we also understand that any issues around written expression can negatively impact on children's ability to perform academically at school. And so this is a real challenge. It's a challenge for children on the spectrum, but it's also a challenge for many children who go to school. So this is something that we really wanted to look into as part of the project. We also have seen evidence that we know that children on the spectrum struggle with fine motor and perceptual skills associated with handwriting. And we've seen research that that shows that assistive technologies such as keyboards can really support children who challenge with handwriting and and may have some physical difficulties with handwriting activities. So what we proposed then was to examine and design, develop, implement technology that would support the activity of written expression. So this is, I guess, where the whole idea for StepWrite came from. So when we were thinking about this project, and Anne did a lot of thinking about this project, and we developed a framework to really understand what we were trying to achieve with the software and with the assistive technology. And we needed to consider the student. So what needs were we trying to support? What challenges were facing children, particularly in mainstream classrooms? I should say that when we were thinking about this technology and we were thinking about the support we would offer, we were very much interested in how we could roll technology out within classroom contexts. So we were looking at what needs we needed to support. When we were thinking about environment, we were thinking about that environment. So how we might move from school to home, how the software might take into consideration the social context, and that idea of working within a classroom environment. What are the barriers that the teachers might face if they were trying to roll out writing experiences and writing activities? And we were thinking about the task itself. And when it came to that task, what we really wanted to acknowledge is this idea of universal design for learning. And what this concept is that we create technology that's ready for every child. Every child within a classroom might find this technology useful in some ways. And this sort of strategy acknowledges that children are naturally diverse learners. And what we wanted to the technology and the app to do was to be appropriate for children with different skills, interests, motivations. And so it would be able to, you know, if we come back to that environment circle that you can see on the screen, it would be something that every child in a classroom could pick up and use and find effective and engaging and interesting. And when we look at sort of the intersection between these three areas, or the way we framed it is that when we're thinking about the student and the task, if we create something that supports your needs and it has this universal design approach, then that will give students a sense of self-efficacy. So this idea that they are in control, they can pick it up, they can use it by themselves. You know, there was this idea that sometimes assistive technologies, when they're rolled out in classrooms, make students feel different or unusual or set apart from everyone else. And we really wanted to kind of avoid that sense that you're using this technology and it's because, you know, we've singled you out and you need this support. So we wanted to create something where everyone would feel, I guess, confident and competent and really harnessing their motivations to use the software to feel successful. When we're thinking about the environment and the task, what we were then also trying to do was get this sense of scaffolding. So how can we scaffold children to step through the tasks, to do it in a sort of chunked way so that they could feel, once again, confident in what they're doing, but in a guided way. So it's not like a blank sheet of paper that you might get when you're asked to do a particular writing task. And I guess the final piece of the puzzle for us was thinking about the student and the environment, and thinking about this idea of how do we support children to, you know, we were, as Cheryl mentioned, we were particularly interested in persuasive writing. Persuasive writing is something we know all children are required to do when they're doing their NAT plan, testing as an example in schools. And so what we were trying to do is think about what strategies could we roll out in a classroom context that would support students. And we worked within a self-regulation strategy, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. So self-regulation strategy has been shown to support the conceptual aspects of writing. It's a technique that encourages students to plan, to organise, to sequence their ideas, to write and to review. So what we found is that this was a really effective strategy for us to consider in the design of some technology to support children with written expression. We chose a particular strategy called Powertree, and that's why our first version of the software was called Project Powertree. This is a simple mnemonic that children can use, or anyone can use, to think about how they might structure a piece of persuasive writing. So POW stands for pick my idea, organise my notes, write and say more. And then the tree aspect is, you know, getting into the details of actually writing a piece of persuasive text where you have, you know, paragraphs structured with a topic sentence, some reasons for why you take a particular point in view, you explain those reasons, and then you end and examine and you think about that. So it encourages some reflection as well. This particular mnemonic is built on the work of Harris et al, and I've included the reference there if you're interested. So what we decided to do was embed this particular strategy within the software so students could, in a systematic way, work through this strategy to help them construct text. So just when you, and I guess what I wanted to show with this particular slide is, you know, this has been a process where we've undertaken development. So we took this idea, we undertook the initial prototype development. We then, we wanted to see how effective it was, and Cheryl talked about this idea of evidence-based outcomes, and we really wanted to understand the strengths of the software that we had developed. We did that looking at particular children, but we also examined the class-wide use within mainstream schools. So we took it out, we worked with classroom classes, and we looked at all students using the app. We did some updates based on that, and that's when that utilisation project came into play. And we did a further study examining in-class use within Autism Queensland schools. So when it came to app development, it was very much an iterative process and a co-design process. And when I talk about co-design, I mean that it involved a lot of different people. And this was one of the things that Anne worked very hard on as a part of the PhD process. So initially we did some low fidelity prototyping. So this was Anne working with the graphic designer to flesh out ideas. And these ideas were based on an examination of existing educational technology, aged for children between 9 and 12. And we did focus on that sort of age group between grade 4 and grade 7, when we think it's very important as you're developing skills and abilities around written expression, and particularly persuasive writing. So we did focus in that age group. Based on that prototyping, there were then co-design activities. So this was with, I think it was 4 groups of children came together, and that was including children on the autism spectrum. So we got input from a broad range of children. We were then involved in the app development and prototype refinement, and that was with teachers. That was with an adult on the autism spectrum and 2 children, and one of those children was on the autism spectrum. So it's been through quite a rigorous process. I'll show you some of the initial screenshots, and you can see here how the mnemonic comes out through the scaffolding. So we've got the POW as you start to develop the ideas, and the tree coming together as children are prompted as they work through to develop their ideas. What do we find? And I realise that I sort of need to wrap it up. It's really hard to talk about 7 years of research in 15 minutes. Thanks, Cheryl. So what we found out, and we have a paper publication about the findings, and I've got a reference to that later, is that we found that teachers and students reported that they felt the app improved overall quality of writing outcomes. And it actually supported students to write more. And when we looked at, we interviewed students, we asked them questions, and they reported that they were feeling more positive. And we thought that was a really important outcome. They felt that it was helping them improve their planning, their goal setting, and their ability to evaluate their writing. Teachers noticed that the students' writing improved after class, and they used the app for 4 weeks, and afterwards they felt that their in-class writing had improved and there was more willingness to engage in writing. We did see some room for improvement. We got feedback from children to say that they wanted more game-like features. We know kids play games. They wanted it to look a bit more like a game, to feel a bit more like a game. And we needed to better capture the outcomes from writing. We didn't have a very good way to catch that for teachers to look at the writing outcomes and to say those sort of outcomes. We also noticed that we needed more flexibility and to provide this notion of personal preference. You know, this is what interests and that a student might bring to the process. So there's free writing you can do now. You can see with the current screenshots that we've got badges and awards and achievements associated with using the app. So we're very excited about those updates. We have done a trial at Autism Queensland schools. As I've said, it was undertaken over 1 school term, 4 classes across 2 schools. And we did in-class observations and teacher interviews, and we're analysing that data at the moment, and our preliminary analysis indicates positive outcomes from this trial as well. So that's the StepWrite project in 15 minutes. I would love to answer any questions that you have, and I've put the reference to the paper that we've written that describes in more detail the outcomes of that first study. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Peter. You did a very good job of squeezing 7 years of research and an incredible amount of work into 15 minutes, so well done. On that note, of course, the approach that Peter and Anne particularly took with the Universal Design for Learning approach is very consistent with the Autism CRC's approach to our work in the education space, where of course we're increasingly finding that which benefits the students on the spectrum actually benefits the whole class, and Anne's research particularly certainly affirmed that. So thank you, Peter.